Today we have an amazing human being that I recently met. I had a conversation with him prior to this recording, and I can tell you guys that you are going to be delighted to have him. He has so much knowledge, so much to offer to the community, and just a lot of wisdom. And so with no further ado, let me introduce guys to Dr. Reggie Thomas.
Hi, Marta. How are you?
I'm good, Reggie. And you?
I'm good. I'm glad to see you again. Yeah,
I know, right?
thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Yeah.
No, thank you for having me. I mean, how I said, we had a conversation before this recording, and I really was impressed, not only for what you provide to the community and what you give us with all your knowledge and service, but also for who you are. Very humble, very kind, but someone who has a lot to offer for us. So thank you.
All right.
So let's start with the introduction. Please introduce yourself to the audience. Who is Dr. Reggie Thomas?
Okay. So, Marta, where I usually, I'm asked that question a lot. Where I like to start is my family. That's what I'm most proud of. So I'm married to Janine. We've been married 36 years. We celebrated our 36th wedding anniversary last summer. We have two grown daughters. Amanda is 32 and Emily is 30. So I'm a girl dad, which I'm really proud of that. It made me more tender having daughters. And so I'm a proud girl dad, proud of both of my girls. We live in Southern California, and I am a full-time professional speaker. I do keynotes at conferences and summits, and I do workshops. I do professional development training. And the topics that I speak on are workplace wellness, burnout prevention, burnout recovery, and resilience. And so those are the topics that I speak on, and having fun doing it. I love it. It's my passion.
Oh, well, thank you so much for introducing yourself. Guys, this is just another man who has a lot of experience, especially having two daughters. I mean, everybody says that being a parent, I'm not a parent, but acknowledging that parents have a lot of wisdom, and especially when you have more than one kid, brings a lot of new skill sets. If you could say applicable new skill sets, because I think that parents have always skill sets that are transferable, right? People don't recognize them as such, but parents have some skill sets that people like me who are not parents don't have. So I want to just acknowledge that, because you just said that's part of who you are, and the man that you have become, the professional that you have become. So thank you for sharing that. So let's not waste time here. Tell us, what's the story for us today? I know that you mentioned that it's going to be related to burnout, which is something that you are an expert, something that you really talk about and advocate, which is something also very important, especially nowadays with the whole current market and whatnot. So take it away.
So the reason I want to talk about burnout, Marta, it's really something that is very personal to me. I was in faith-based nonprofit for 30 years, and burnout was just something that was out there. I'd heard the term. I knew what the term was. I knew what burnout was, but it was something that I never thought would happen to me. And so about 7 years ago, I started feeling burnout symptoms. At first, I didn't think it was burnout, didn't know it was burnout. I just thought maybe I was getting tired. And then once I discovered that I was in burnout, I didn't tell anyone. I lived in isolation. I just pushed through because I thought it was something that you can just push through, because I didn't really understand burnout. So I just thought I would push through it. I thought it was a season. And as you know, burnout has three categories of symptoms. So there are physical symptoms, there are emotional symptoms, and there are behavioral symptoms. And I had a few symptoms under each category. My physical symptom was I really started struggling with insomnia. I was under so much stress. I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't turn my brain off. And to be honest with you, it's 5 years later now, and I'm completely recovered, but I'm just now getting my sleep cycle back in the proper rhythm. I'm just now starting to sleep well. So it took me a few years to get my sleep pattern back, but I couldn't sleep. The emotional symptoms were I hated my job. I did it because I had to make money. I needed a salary, had a family to support. But honestly, I woke up every day just dreading going to work. I was emotionally exhausted, depleted, demoralized, just didn't really like what I was doing. And then the behavioral symptom was really interesting. Some people, when they go through burnout, they check out. What I did was I put my best foot forward. I kept working hard. Nobody knew I was in burnout. But the behavioral symptom was as I isolated from people. I'm an extreme extrovert. I love being around people. I'm very social. And what I found myself doing is I found myself wanting to be alone. So that was my behavioral symptom. So I finally hit the wall. And so I went to my board and said, hey, I'm in burnout. I need some time off. And so I took a 10-week leave of absence. And when I came back, the board terminated me. And so that's how I really started my new business of consulting and speaking. And so that's my story. It's very personal. And that's why I speak on burnout, because it is a major epidemic. And so when I get on stage and speak about burnout, I'm not just sharing information about what I've read or what I've heard other people share. It's very personal. And I love my story now because I overcame burnout, but I didn't just overcome burnout. I'm thriving today. And so my message is a message of hope. And if you're in burnout, and hopefully we can talk a little bit about the whole process and how to recover. But if you're in burnout, I just want you to know you're looking at a guy who was in the fires of burnout, and I recovered successfully, and I'm thriving today.
First and foremost, wow. I'm very impressed of the humbleness that you tell this story and the vulnerability, because acknowledging that's part of your life, it's something that people tend to not necessarily highlight. It's more of, okay, like I really don't want to talk about it. Kind of scars you in a way that it's kind of like a trauma, because it makes you reassess your whole world of how you view work, how you view yourself, and how you view you as a human. And I was taking a quick notes that when you were telling your story, and I want to kind of like take a step back and go a little bit by little. Well, break it down, basically.
Okay, let's break it down, girl. Let's break it down.
So the first question I have, you mentioned that you didn't tell anybody, that you kept it to yourself. And I have a curious question. Why you kept it to yourself? Is it because, and this has to touch with the masculinity aspect of a man who is, you said, you're a father, you have to provide for your family. Is it because of the role that you sell yourself? I cannot show weakness to my family? Or is it because you didn't really know how to show yourself that vulnerable? Saying I needed assistance. We're not necessarily talking about the burnout itself, but that aspect of I need to keep it to myself. You acknowledge that you were struggling, which we'll talk about in a second, but how do you went about that? Because as a man, I think this plays a factor. Probably most likely than not, I've realized that even in my own family, my dad, who's an entrepreneurial, he has gone a long way to learn how to speak about his emotions and when he needs to ask for assistance. And he also went through a burnout situation, and I realized that he never said anything for a long period of time. And I have you here, so I would like you to give us a little glimpse of what it means in that aspect for you.
Marta, I think you hit on a part of it. We males, we tend to be very prideful. When we're struggling, we don't want to appear weak. And we don't want to appear weak to our families, to our spouses, to our children, to our colleagues. So a part of it was male pride, but it was actually bigger than that. It really was. It was much bigger than that. One of the reasons I kept it to myself and I isolated was because there is a stigmatization around burnout. A lot of people don't understand burnout. They think if you're in burnout that you're weak. They see you as a failure. They think it's a mental illness. They think you're having a nervous breakdown. They don't really understand it. And I knew that it was burnout. I knew that I wasn't having a mental breakdown or a nervous breakdown, but I knew that once I admitted that, people were going to see me in a different light. And so I think things are changing now, but when I was going through burnout, I didn't really have a psychologically safe place to express it. Okay. And what I want to encourage your audience to do today is if you feel like you're in burnout, tell somebody. You've got friends, you've got people who love you, you have people who care about you, tell somebody. I would have recovered much sooner if I had acknowledged it sooner. But I allowed myself to go into chronic burnout just because I didn't feel safe sharing it. And so a lot of it has to do not just with the male pride, that was probably 10% of it. Most of it was the fact that I just wasn't in a safe environment. I was in a faith-based nonprofit organization where it's unspiritual or it's weak to be burnout. And so that's the perception out there. So I stayed in my closet and continued to suffer alone.
That's interesting. Actually, very odd, the fact that you're working in a faith-based area and you're not able to say, I need assistance, right? Or provide
Mhm.
that service. But I want to put a pause and just kind of like ask you to explain what means burned out and what means chronic burnout. These are two terminologies, and I think that's important to make sure what we're speaking into and people understand what is actually the terminologies.
Okay, I love that question. In fact, I wrote a book called Burnout Pains, and the first chapter, I spent an entire chapter explaining what burnout is and what burnout is not. So that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that question. That way we can frame the rest of our conversation. But burnout is not physical, although there are physical symptoms. The classic definition of burnout is emotional exhaustion. And there are a number of causes of burnout, but it comes from depleting yourself. So when you don't feed yourself, when you don't invest in yourself, when you give so much, but you're not replenishing yourself, what happens is that you become emotionally drained and exhausted. That's what burnout is. It's emotional exhaustion. When we talk about chronic burnout, we're talking about the severity of it. Okay. You can actually function with burnout. I did for about 2 years. I started feeling burnout back in 2018, and I didn't acknowledge it until 2020. So the difference between mild burnout versus chronic burnout is that you come to a place where you go, I've got to stop and I've got to do something. It's almost like having a flat tire. If your tires get low, you can drive for a while. It's not good for the car. It's not good for the tires, but you can drive for a while. But when that tire gets flat, you can't continue to drive on it because you'll do more damage to your car. And so you have to stop and you have to fix the flat tire or replace the flat tire. You have to stop. And so that's the difference between just mild burnout and chronic burnout. Chronic burnout, you have to stop and start the recovery process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it sounds like because going to the psychology of it, right? But it sounds like also kind of I'm throwing this thought right here. I'm not sure if it's right or wrong. You could correct me, but it's kind of like low key. You become addicted to that lifestyle, and then you have a hard time to stop that addiction. And even though you're burned out and you acknowledge that your body is it, you don't know how to live that life without burning out yourself. I don't know if you could correct me or not, but that's how I perceive it. It's if you're in a chronic burnout, you're like, I don't know any other way. I don't know how to not function the way I'm this way. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. And chronic burnout is where the symptoms get very severe,
Okay.
like I actually had nights where I didn't sleep at all. Yeah. It started off, I'll just talk about my physical symptoms. So it started off where it took me a while to get to sleep, but I would go to sleep. And then I went through a phase where I could get to sleep, but I couldn't stay asleep. And then when I hit chronic burnout, I couldn't get to sleep at all. I mean, I was awake most of the night. So really chronic burnout just means that the symptoms are elevated.
Yeah. And so you said that, it took you a long period of time for you to even just ask for assistance. I want to go back in the whole concept of how you even broke that, because my brain sees in two aspects. The one personal, you as a Reggie, as the man who is like, okay, I'm going to keep it to myself. You also mentioned that the company that you were working for, they didn't allow you to have a safe place for you to even acknowledge that to them. And so how did you even go about that in the personal side? So if you were not safe at work, at what point in time you said, okay, I need to turn to my family, my personal safety net, which you knew it was there. How you go about that? How do you even got the courage, because it takes a courage, I would say, to be able to acknowledge that the place that you're working is not safe. Home is safe, but you have, your own internal conflicts. Can you just kind of explain to me what was your thought process for you to
Okay.
say, enough is enough. I can't
Okay.
do it anymore.
So let me clarify something. I only isolated with work. My wife was
Okay.
aware. My wife was aware of it the whole time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the entire time I was in burnout. As soon as I started feeling burnout, or I recognized I was in burnout, I immediately let her know where I was.
Oh, okay.
And so she walked with me through it. So that, I didn't hide it from my wife. Where I hid was
Was from work.
from people at work. I don't know if this is a good answer to your question, but I'm going to answer your question. I came to a place where my own personal health was more important than my job. So I humbled myself, and I went to my boss, and I went to the board and just said, hey, I'm burned out and I need to address this. When I did that, Marta, I knew that I was putting my career at risk. I knew that, but you know what? I didn't care. So that decision really came through reflection, and out of my reflection and mental processing, what I decided is that my emotional and mental health and well-being were a lot more important than my career. So I decided to take a 10-week leave of absence. And obviously that led to my termination, because I was a very good employee, had great performance evaluations. I think they terminated me because they just didn't understand the condition of burnout. So really, I just came to a place where I'm like, I don't care. I've got to focus on me and my own healing and recovery.
You know what I'm seeing right now? Because thank you for clarifying that your wife or, your family knew what was happening to you. It just came to me like two different thought processes. One, in the business aspect, I find it interesting that you, as the professional that you are and the hard worker you are, you were in a point of your life or your career, apparently, that what people perceive you as, or what they will say about me as a professional, was such a fear factor for you to hold yourself for so long. I understand that people say like, I have to be careful, it's strategic. I don't want to show weakness. I'm trying to build my career. I don't want to ruin my career because I don't want to, whatever it is. That power, that burnout stigma, and the perception of misunderstanding what burnout is, hold you hostage for so long, to a point where you, as a professional, depleted yourself. You hurt more your career in the longer run, because you were not thriving. You were in the survival mode at that point. I want to understand what it means to live a double life, where at home you go and you take that armor down and you're like, whoa, like, wife, I'm struggling. And the fact that you are not suffering by yourself, you had your wife, which I think is very beautiful. It says a lot about your relationship with your wife and how you are as a father as well. I'm pretty sure that also brings some sort of burden or emotional distress in the family, because your wife is like, I would imagine, is like, nobody wants to see the loved ones suffer for their career. But you're here battling. My head is like, wow, you're in a dilemma of what should I prioritize? It kind of reassess your goals or how you view yourself. At what point I'm going to let other people dictate my life, because I'm fearful that they will not going to accept me for who I am, because I have this condition that I basically did it myself because I was not willing to say, I need a break. I don't know your thoughts, if that makes sense. I'm just like blown away, because I've not experienced burnout, but I have experienced it from my father. Even though my father helped us to understand him, like we give him that safety, it doesn't mean that he's not struggling, in his daily basis, because he doesn't want to. I don't know. I'm just rambling, but that's where my thought is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Marta, I am a highly resilient person. That is the best way I can answer that. I've been through a lot in my lifetime, and we're not born with resilience and strength. The way you develop resilience and endurance and perseverance is by going through stuff. This wasn't the first crisis I'd been through in my life. In fact, I think all the other crises that I'd been through in my life previously probably prepared me for going through burnout and being terminated. But I'm a highly resilient person. I can take a lot of pressure. I can perform, even though mentally and emotionally my head and my heart aren't in the game. I can perform. In fact, one story, when I was sharing this with my board of directors, one of them said, Reggie, I had no idea you were in burnout. Had no idea. You seem happy all the time. You did your job well. And that's just the person I am. I'm not one to roll over. I keep going. I can push forward. I don't feel like I lived a double life. I feel like I was just being responsible. I knew that I had a job and I needed to get it done. Now, on the home front, it didn't affect my family at all. In fact, when I would come home, my home was my safe place. When I would come home, I was the fun Reggie, the loving Reggie, maintained a really good marriage, had a great time with my kids. That was like freeing when I would come home. Yeah, that was like my reprieve. But it didn't affect my relationship with my family at all.
I mean, again, burnout is very complex. So going back to your story, what was it that you think that the company did not understand about burnout, or even just in general wellness for their employees? Is it because they didn't have training? We're talking about, if you're in a board of directors, we're talking about higher level. And in higher level leadership roles, there's more stress, there's more pressure, not only to perform better for you, but because you also have other people looking at you and, you want to be the best person that you can be in that moment in time. So in a board of directors, for me, it's interesting that they were not willing to understand or have some sort of empathy or compassion to your situation. Because if you're coming back and they terminate you, that means that they did not understood nothing that you said. Can you tell me a little bit about that relationship in that realm of, board of directors and you coming in and having this conversation?
So, Marta, I can't speak for them. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know why they terminated me. I was not in on the discussions when they made those decisions. I'm not sure what they did not understand. I can answer your question from a technical perspective. So there are four myths around burnout. Number one, some people think it's a medical issue. Burnout is not a medical issue. In fact, when you look at the medical journals, you will not find burnout listed as a medical condition. So that's the first myth. Burnout is not a medical condition. Again, it has physical symptoms, but there are no physical causes of burnout, and there's no physical diagnostic criterion for burnout. So you will not find burnout in any of the medical journals. Secondly, there is the myth that burnout is a mental illness. It's not a mental illness. It's a syndrome. It's a condition that is temporary. And again, the American Psychological Association does not consider burnout a mental illness. In fact, if you search all the psychological journals, again, there's no diagnostic criterion for burnout from a psychological perspective. So people in the mental health field, the professional field of psychology, they do not consider burnout a mental illness. Number three, some people hold the myth that burnout is a nervous breakdown. There's a big difference between a nervous breakdown and burnout. Here's the difference. You ready for this?
Tell me.
If you're in burnout, you can function. I did for 2 years. If you're in burnout, you can function. When you have a nervous breakdown, you can't function.
Right.
You can't function with a nervous breakdown. I mean, you're just so far mentally and emotionally broken, you just can't deal with life. Okay.
Right.
Nervous breakdown and burnout, they're not the same thing.
Right.
And then there are some people that think burnout is the same as stress.
Right.
It's not. Stress can create burnout if it's prolonged and not
Right.
managed well, but it's not the same. And so, there were like, 13 people on this board, and you probably if you were to talk to the members of that board, some of them might think that I had a medical condition. Some might have thought I had a emotional condition. Some
Right.
might have thought I was having I can't answer that question because I never
Right.
talked to any
No.
of them. But
Yeah.
those are the four major myths around what burnout is.
I was like, my question was more into regards like, if this type of people who are in the board, do they have trainings about this? I mean, I think nowadays they have, but I was thinking more like, if you were in this organization and you have worked for them, they know who you were. They acknowledge how good you were, still delivering, and how you say you were chronicle burnout. I was just thinking like, is it just ignorance at its best, or is the company was not willing to invest in trainings? Because someone who believes in training and continuous learning, I think that no matter what, no matter if you're a CEO of a company or not, there's still learnings. There's still things that you need to learn. There's still trainings that you need to have to be the best leader that you could be. So that was more my thought. It's like, is there just people, boomer, I mean, generation of boomers, not in the disrespectful way, but who have, like my dad as an example, who had a hard time to just acknowledge what burnout was, right? Because that's like, the whole holistic way of how you perceive yourself and self-awareness and emotional intelligence. That was more my question, was more like if they just didn't know any better.
So yeah, I can answer that, Marta. So number one, yeah, it was ignorance. None of them really understood what burnout was. And when I use the word ignorance, I don't mean that in a negative way. They just weren't educated or informed on, number one, what burnout is and how it manifests itself. And number two, how to deal with a good employee who's going with it. They were just ignorant from that standpoint. Yeah, I don't mean that negatively. I just mean that from a lack of education and knowledge and information. The second thing is, it was not a healthy culture, staff culture. Typically in the faith-based nonprofit circle that I was in, overworking is glorified. The harder you work, the more committed you are, the more dedicated you are, the more faithful you are. Overworking is a badge of honor. And number three, they don't value well-being. And so I think that's a lot of what's going on. Those three things, I think that was what was really going on. Lack of information, the overwork culture, and then just the lack of valuing well-being.
So it was like an older,
Yes.
older format company where you
The
have
board was a bunch of older men. Yeah, a bunch of older men. Yeah.
I mean, that it says a lot. This was in 2018, 2020. That's interesting because that's not too far away if you think about it in timeline. And you still have this organization that's pushing the overworkness, is not valuing wellness, is not valuing educating, continues finding ways to improve the company culture. The culture within a company, especially if that board of directors thought this way, and you were the one, or probably the only one, who maybe spoke about what's really happening, and then they terminate you. I'm pretty sure anybody behind you were like, I'm not gonna say anything.
Yeah.
I'm laughing about it because it just says how important it is to have diversity of thoughts in board of directors and in that realm of leadership. This is high end, and it says a lot because how they react and how they manage this type of situation like you had sends a message to everybody. In this case, they send a message is like, well, we're not gonna have someone who we believe as so he's no longer able to provide what we need, which is far from truth, right? You just needed time to heal. And so I have a random question to you, because do you think you're burned out? It started working for this company because it's the hustle of a company that, like you have to overwork yourself, or it was happening way before that? And in this particular role, it just exacerbated your burnout. Like sometimes people carry minimum level burnout and then you suddenly hit a role that is like, like pushes to the limit. I'm just wondering, because 2 years of chronic burnout, it means that you were fully aware and self-aware of what the situation was. Prior to that, was it, again, ignorance at its best? Like you didn't, or you trying not to like acknowledge it? It was within this company specifically because of the culture and of the multiple factors that you mentioned that made it happen? Or it was just something that you have been carrying for a longer period of time because of your work ethic and your way of perceiving work life?
No, I think it started with this particular season of my life. So I think there are a couple things here. Number one, in my book, I talk about the individual causes of burnout and also the organizational causes of burnout. I'm a type A personality, and type A personalities, they tend to have a higher burnout rate than a type B personality. So type A's, we're driven, we're ambitious, we're hard workers, we're drivers, and we don't just drive other people, we drive ourselves, okay? And type A personalities, we tend to be perfectionist, and all of that stuff, Marta, is emotional, and it can wear on you emotionally, okay? So I had that going on, but then secondly, there was some organizational stuff going on as well. Number one, I had a boss that was a micromanager, and micromanagement can lead you into burnout because of unclear expectations. You never know what the expectations are. You don't have a lot of power and a lot of autonomy. I was the number two person. I was like the COO, and the CEO was a micromanager. So I didn't feel like I had a lot of autonomy. I had to run a lot of stuff by him before I could make decisions. And then I had to deal with toxic staff members. And being the COO, I was the chief of staff. So whenever two employees were fighting, I had to get in there and mediate. So just that, the nature of the kind of work I was doing led to my burnout. So there were internal factors, but there are also external factors.
Can you summarize or bullet point very quickly what factors are considered red flag in a company for anybody who's in a company that will introduce or foster burnout? I don't know I'm not sure if that question is correct, but you just said the fact that your boss was a micromanager, the fact that there's some toxic people in the company that you were working with. What are things that you could say, hey guys, if you have this in a company, that would probably not necessarily be the main factor, but a factor that builds your burnout or create more burnout in your life? Can you just...
So number one, obviously, if you work for a micromanager, you're going to be more prone to burnout. Number two, if you work in a company where the employees are in conflict a lot, there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of bickering, you're going to be more prone to burnout. Number three, if you work for a company that does not respect personal boundaries, you're going to burn out. Let me give you an example. If you work for a company and they expect you to work on the weekends, to answer emails at night, they bother you while you're on vacation. I mean, my boss did that to me. He would email me at night or call me at night, call me while I was on vacation, that kind of thing. You're going to be more prone to burnout. If you work for a company that doesn't encourage you to take your vacation and take your PTO time, you're going to be more prone to burnout. So those are some of those organizational factors that you want to pay attention to.
To finish up the question of burnout, do you have a suggestion of how personally someone who can evaluate themselves? Because you said it's not a mental illness, it's not a physical illness. It's in the very grayish areas. So can you bullet point very quickly, what are things people can reflect upon themselves to say, okay, this is burnout?
Yeah. So what you have to do, you have to look at the full range of symptoms, For example, just because you're having insomnia, that doesn't mean you're in burnout. That may be something else. But if you've got one or two symptoms from the physical category, one or two symptoms from the emotional category, one or two symptoms from the behavioral category, and they're all together, you're probably in burnout. So for me, it was insomnia. It was feeling tired all the time. Those were two of my physical symptoms. The emotional symptoms were I hated my job. There was no energy. I wasn't energized by my job anymore. I was just going through the motions. And then my behavioral symptoms was I isolated from people. I worked with people, but just being around people was draining. And it's good to recognize the symptoms. And what I would encourage people to do is go out online, even get my book. I have a whole chapter on the symptoms. Get my book. It's available on Amazon. It's called Burnout Pains. And get my book. It's a very simple read. It's only about 150 pages. But in my book, I deal with what burnout is. I deal with what burnout is not. I deal with the causes of burnout, the symptoms of burnout, how to prevent it. And then if you're already in burnout, how do you recover from it? So I deal with all of those topics in my book. But at the very least, Google the signs and symptoms of burnout, and then always evaluate yourself. Make sure you evaluate yourself.
Can I ask if people go through therapy, or I think like you are someone who are very self-aware and have a lot of emotional intelligence. Not everybody has those type of competencies. We always strive to work on them. But if someone who not necessarily has those, do you suggest psychology or some sort of like therapy to help them understand themselves? I'm just wondering because it's not something that a professional, how you say, it's not a mental illness. So how do you have support? Because I'm thinking of myself, if I'm in a situation where I don't have anybody to talk to in my personal life and I don't want to talk about it at work, I would love to hear your thoughts on that aspect. Like, how do you reach out for assistance when you're in a maybe more isolated or you don't have that support? Like,
So yeah, I've got two answers to that. So number one, I recommend people to talk to their friends outside of that unsafe space. Once I recognized that I was in burnout, I have a good friend who lives in Louisiana. He went through burnout about 15 years ago. So he was the first person outside of my wife that I talked to. And he walked me through his process, gave me some encouragement as to what I needed to do. If you can't share it with your boss or share it with somebody within your company, hopefully you've got good friends outside of your work. I'm going to make an assumption that most people do. We all have good friends. Talk to a friend. A good friend is going to be a safe place to have that conversation. And then number two, I am a big champion of counseling and therapy. So find a counselor that you can talk to. Counselors are great at helping people when they're in the throes of burnout. So I would definitely recommend that.
okay. Okay, trying to wrap this up very quickly. I have a random question, and this is just more me being curious. Do you think, I'm bringing something of like, as of today with the current market, the job market is bad. There's a lot of things happening in the world outside of the United States, right? And inside of the United States. Do you think personally people can be burned out when they don't work? So unemployed people who are just trying to find a job. I am curious if you think, because normally we are talking in the scenario like work makes you burn out, right? Or it's a factor that leads to burnout. Do you think people who are unemployed can be burned out?
Absolutely. So when we deal with burnout, Marta, usually what we're dealing with is workplace burnout.
Yeah.
But when you look at the classic definition of burnout, again, what is it? It's emotional exhaustion. You can become burned out being a single mom. You can become burned out being a parent. You can become burned out just living life in the world that we live in now with so many political headwinds and economic headwinds going on. You can get burned out from hopelessness and despair of trying to find a new job. Because if you think about it, to find a job today, it's like a full-time job just to find a full-time job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're on the phone all day, you're emailing, you're sending out resumes, you're applying for jobs, and the constant rejection or no responses. Yes. So you can become emotionally exhausted from a number of things. But what we typically do is we deal with burnout in the workplace. And the reason we deal with burnout typically in the workplace is because, number one, according to the statistics, over 70% of the workforce today is in burnout, according to a Forbes study.
Wow.
Number two, it's affecting all industries. You want to know the top four industries? The top four industries are number one, healthcare, number two, education, number three, social services, and number four, emergency services. And burnout doesn't just affect the individual, burnout affects the company, retention, productivity, finances, culture. It affects the company as well.
Right.
And so, but when we deal with burnout, we typically deal with it from the workplace and how it's impacted the workplace. But to answer your question, yes, if you look at the classic definition of burnout, that it's emotional exhaustion, it can happen outside of the workplace.
Right. Yeah. I mean, granted, I think right now the focus is work because how you said, like, there is burnout in the companies and companies are, or they're trying to put a bandage to the burnout to their employees or just completely ignore it. And it has to do or you do this because this is the way we're doing it, or you get out and you go somewhere else. But, don't think this term or this conversation only applies to work. It affects us in the personal life. And so Dr. Reggie says a lot of things. You have to look at his book if you want to understand better. And I just want to say it is interesting because there's so much conversation about this, right? And just having the simple conversation of understanding how you as a person deal with it, right? And I want to end this conversation and wrap this conversation with the healing aspect. And I would like for you to just briefly talk about your healing process and what that looked like. So by the end, we could just have a kind of like a snapshot of like your whole journey. The fact that you were terminated, I'm pretty sure was a surprise because you would not expect that. And I know this is not a conversation fully on the work environment, but I really want to shine that aspect of what it means to be burned out as a human being. And because we don't talk about this in the human aspect.
Right.
We look at it as the company did this and company did that. But what can you do, Reggie? What can I do, Marta, to overcome this?
Yeah, first of all, I want to just say to those of you who are listening, if you feel like you're in burnout, I just want you to know there's hope for you. There's hope. Burnout is a condition, meaning that it's not a permanent situation. It's a season that you're going through. And if you do the right thing, you're going to come out of it. Now, it's a process. It's not like flipping a switch and coming out of burnout. It's a process. There are 6 things that I think is important. And I always tell people what it takes to prevent burnout are the same things that it takes to recover from burnout. Number 1, I call them the 6 R's. Number 1, it's rest. Number 2, it's reflection. Number 3, it's recalibration. Number 4, it's reevaluation. Number 5, it's reconnection. And then number 6, it's recreation. Okay, so let me just talk about the first 3 real briefly, and then we'll need to wrap this up because I have another meeting, by the way. The first one is rest. And now that's going to look differently for different people. For me, it was a 10-week sabbatical, 10 weeks leave of absence. For others, it could be 6 weeks, 4 weeks, or 2-week fade. That's relative to your situation. I don't know your work situation, but I do know that burnout, if you're in burnout, you've got a flat tire emotionally, and you got to stop and you got to fix that flat tire. So you have to rest. The second thing is you've got to reflect on how you got into burnout. The way I did that is during my 10-week leave of absence. You know what I did every single day, or one of the things I did every single day? I journaled. I journaled what I was feeling. I journaled what I was learning about myself. I journaled my whole work experience. And in that journaling, I identified 2 or 3 things that led me into burnout. But this is the most important thing. I want you to hear this. This is the most important thing. Recalibration. If you rest and reflect and go back to work without changing anything, you're going to have a relapse. So for some people, it means changing your mindset. For some people, it means changing a certain personality behavior. For some people, it means changing things at work or changing the way you do your work. But you've got to change something. Because what burnout is not a weakness, it's a warning sign. It's a warning sign that something is wrong and something needs to change. To recover from burnout and to prevent yourself from going into burnout again, you have to recalibrate. You have to change something about your life. And so I will end with that.
Awesome. I mean, that's a lot. Guys, he has a book. I think that we definitely want to invest more in our health. So definitely have to go read his book. Wrapping up this very quickly, do you have any particular message briefly from everything that we talked about? There was one thing that people need to take away from this conversation.
2 things. Number 1, check in with your emotions often and pay attention to the burnout signs and symptoms. And number 2, don't make the mistake I made. As soon as you recognize you're in burnout, begin the recovery process immediately. The longer you take to address it, the longer it's going to take to recover. That's my closing message.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Reggie, for having us. Thank you for coming to us.
Thank you for having me.
For your information. I know this was there's so much to talk about, but guys, I will link his LinkedIn down below. I'll also link your book in Amazon. They could purchase from there. And just, guys, if you have gone this far for this episode, please just be mindful of yourself, take care of yourself. This is maybe a bit different from my other podcast videos, but this is something very important to talk about. And once again, Dr. Reggie, thank you so much for your time, and appreciate you.
Thank you.
And sharing your story, it's very, very powerful. So thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.